Let's talk about another interesting use case for Suno, and that's to create accompaniments or backing tracks for playing with solo instruments. Now, I'm going to use a classical music example here, but you could create anything as a backing track if you have the appropriate input. For example, a lot of theremin players like to do is play along to The Carnival of the Animals by Saint-Saëns, the Swan. This piece gets a little tiring to me, but it's kind of a classic in the theremin repertoire. So let's see if we can create an accompaniment, or we could create all different kinds of accompaniments in Suno by inputting the score with the cello playing against the piano, and then we'll create a couple versions in Suno, and we'll try and extract that cello part so that only the accompaniment remains that we can then export as an audio file, and then we can have some fun playing our theremin against one of many possible arrangements of this. So let's start. I put in the score with the piano part and the cello part. Now what I did was I kind of made a reduction. This initially was for 2 pianos. There's an orchestral version too, but we're using the piano versions as the input. And the second piano has more just arpeggiated chords along with this, but we want Suno to create its own kind of a version. So all we'll need for the initial input is the bass accompaniment, which you can see here is just kind of arpeggiated notes against the cello, and it doesn't have to be a great input. This is just put into Notion, a notation program, and I can play it and export the WAV file from that. Here, I'll just play a few measures. You can hear it's nothing really great. I didn't put much expression on it. I mean, if you wanted to, you could play in your cello part here, but that really doesn't matter. We're going to extract it anyway. I've just used a steady tempo on this, a fixed BPM, because Suno is going to impose its own tempo change on the piece. It will make it a lot more fluid, and then you can try and match that and make it even more expressive with your playing against the accompaniment, of course. So in the input, I want to make sure the volume of the cello in this case is a little higher than the background accompaniment, because I want Suno to easily be able to extract that. I want Suno to be able to know that, hey, that's the melody. I'll make a stem for that. And then what I'll do is I'll extract stems. I'll remove the melody stem. And what's left should be the accompaniment, the backing track for what I want to play against. So I imported the WAV file that we created with the notation program. That was a pretty mundane performance. And then I created a Suno version of that, saying I want orchestra, I want cello, I don't want any drums, and fade to silence at the end, which Suno may or may not do. Now, from these directions, Suno will try and create an orchestral version of this. And because I said cello, and we have that cello part in the WAV file coming out so strong, Suno will more than likely try and assign that to a cello and play it against an accompaniment it creates. May not always do that, however. Sometimes Suno might add the strings as the melody instead of the cello. You just have to do a few creations to get one that suits your purpose here. Normally, the initial creations will be closest to what you want. I told it weirdness, 16%, style influence I set to about 50% as usual, and then I set the audio influence to 100%, and this is what Suno created. Kind of impressive, but of course, we're not really interested in the nice cello sound that it created. We want to remove that, and we want to have only the accompaniment remaining that we will either download this as stems and do it in the DAW, or perhaps in Suno itself, you can do something similar, but we'll try downloading the stems for this video and see how we can deal with them. So in Suno, we'll get the stems. I had already done this previously, but you can extract them for 50 credits. Let's see the extracted stems for the example that we just played. So there they are. What I'll do is I'll download them to my computer. I'll take them and I'll import them as .wav stems into Cubase, and let's play around with that. So I have the stems imported into Cubase, or whatever DAW you like, and already I can see some problems here. Suno is not at all consistent in how it outputs stems. Some stems might only contain what you expect to be in them. The voice output of Suno is almost always only in the voice stem, but if you have strings or piano or harp or other instruments going on, Suno can distribute those in different stems in ways you can't predict. It might put strings in an FX string as well as the strings. Here we can see that very little is output in the bass stem. The synth stem has a little bit in it. Most everything is either in the FX, which is labeled other stem normally in Suno, or the string stem. But our big problem here is going to be that the string stem has both the cello in it and the string background. And unless we have some program that can separate them, this method is not going to be much use to us. We can see if we play a little bit of the string stem, we'll solo that. So there you could hear we had the cello, but the strings were also in the background. This technique's not going to work for us. We need to come up with some other method of getting the solo line completely out into one stem so all the other lines can be separated out as an accompaniment. Well, a trick we can play with Suno, because we know that it separates out the vocal stems pretty well, and we know that we input our cello line at a pretty high volume, so Suno's going to pick that out as the main melody. What we can do is make a song out of this, put in some dummy lyrics. Doesn't matter what they are, as long as they kind of match up to the rhythm of the melody. Suno now will not use a cello. We'll take that out of the style inputs and we'll put in a soprano or some voice instead, and Suno will use that as the melody. And when we do the stem extraction, now the melody can be removed, and hopefully what will remain is the accompaniment that we can then import into the DAW and maybe fix up a bit, clean up noise, and create our accompaniment that way. Of course, your other option is to take the MIDI stems out of Suno, put them in your DAW, attach them to some samples, and maybe create your accompaniment that way. We'll save that for another video. So I put in some dummy words here. Doesn't matter what they are. It has nothing to do with the song. We're going to totally remove it. So now when I play, this is another version, so the accompaniment is going to be a bit different. We'll hear the voice singing, not the cello, and hopefully that we can extract.
Seem to be where I am. I never felt I ever went so far. Why can't I seem to be where I can't seem to wake up on a falling star.
Doesn't matter what the words are. I'd suggest you put in real text. If you try and put in something like la la or ah ah, Suno sometimes doesn't capture that correctly. Try and come up with some dummy words that map the melody that you want to extract. Now, of course, if you're going to be doing this on a very complicated, fast instrumental line, this might not be the technique that you want to use. But for slow melodies, this is one possibility that may give you a lot of different nice Suno output that you can create all different kinds of accompaniments using this technique. So I've imported the stems into Cubase, and you can do this in any DAW you like. You can see here for this create, the output was more complex than the first one. It has vocals, strings, guitar, bass, an FX, stem, drums, and percussion. So this one added a lot more stuff on me, and you can decide whether or not you want to keep some of these in your accompaniment audio file output or not. Obviously, we want to mute the vocal because that is the original cello line, which is now removed, and the rest will be the total accompaniment. I might want to remove the FX stem as that creates an effect I'm not really too crazy about for this particular output. The drums and percussion, well, that's not really in our original, so we might decide that for that we'll mute those as well. We can go and export now this to a mixdown, a WAV file, and that will be our accompaniment that we can have some fun and play against. And I'll end just playing a little bit of that. But this technique is not for everybody. The one advantage of this is that you can create many, many different versions of your accompaniment, some quite different one to the other, and then you can decide, pick and choose which ones you might want to use as accompaniments. It's a really fun thing to do. Of course, if you wanted to be a purist, you wouldn't do this. You'd go and you'd create a 2-piano accompaniment like the original, but this is certainly one option that gives you a lot of possibility for creating a wide variety of accompaniments with not that much effort, still maintaining the basic melodic harmonic and structure of your input, and what you get out might surprise you.